Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Another Friday, another podcast. And last week you didn't get one. I was busy on the road with my boys, Eric Black, Jason Dunkel, and George T. We were headed down to Grand National Roadster Show, and that's still no excuse, guys. I didn't have one ready for you, so you didn't get it. That's what happened. So hopefully you missed it, and you really appreciate the podcast, and show your appreciation by going to letstalkdubs.com. and picking up some gear or registering for One Crazy Weekend. Registration is open for this year's One Crazy Weekend happening October 3rd through the 5th at the Orleans Hotel and Casino. Go click on the link today. You can reserve your room. Reserve your rooms today. Don't wait till they're sold out. You will be sorry. So make sure that you guys go and get that handled today. Also, while you're there, pick up some merch. Support your boy. Grab a sweatshirt. There's some cool sweatshirts. And get yourself laced up in some Let's Talk Dubs gear. Now, this week's podcast, a lot of cars been coming out in the magazine, and one of those cars that came out was awarded last year's DKP meet, and it's Mark Akullian's 61 Beetle. Mark's car was on the cover of the 2024 Hot VW's Cow Look edition, a yellow, bright yellow 61 Cow Look Beetle, original BRMs, hand-formed deck lid with the Empey scoops, tons and tons of rare early accessories. So it's a good podcast. This car was 20 plus years in the making, and it was Mark's first time in the magazine. Mark was actually in the magazine back in April of 1988 Hot VWs with his K-Well turbo powered 1957 Beetle. So if you got that issue, go back, check it out, and look at what Mark looked like when he was just a young man. And you guys will get a kick out of that. But that's what's on this week's podcast. So a cool story about how this car was built, what it took to get it done, and some of the details that are on it, which were surprising to me. 356 brakes, that he prefers drum brakes over discs. But hey, everybody's got their own flavor. And we talk about motor build, transaxle, all that good stuff. So it's a great podcast, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy the listen. So don't forget to support those that support your favorite podcast. Go to Ross Wolf today and pick up some more jewelry for your car. I just picked up some red Velocity stacks for my new supercharger setup that's on my 1800 in the chop top. Red, of course, to match the sweet chop top. So getting that doped out, got the dipstick, my favorite thing to get from them, and some of the other stuff that they carry. So if you need deck lid hinges, if you need radial block off plates, whatever you need, man, go to Ross Wolf today. They got it. And don't forget, like always, subscribe to VW Trends Magazine. Matter of fact, next week, Paul Morton, who does the tech articles for VW Trends Magazine, is going to be on next week's podcast. So you'll want to check that out. We do kind of a deep dive and throwback into some of the old stuff. Conversations cover things like mini trucks, car audio, magazines, which he was an editor for, Auto Sound and Security. So we talk a lot about a little bit everything, BMX, skateboarding, all that good stuff put together. So it'll be a great podcast for you guys to listen to. But in the meanwhile, go subscribe today at vwtrendsmagazine.com. That's vwtrendsmagazine.com, and subscribe so you don't miss an issue today. But we're into it, guys. It's a good podcast this week. Some history on Mark Akullian's car, this super nice 61 traditional cow look built to the proper 70s style. So it's a great podcast, a lot of detail, and it's quite a story that this car undertook and his history in the VW world. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it this week with the 2024 cow look Hot VW's cover car, Mark Akullian, on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Okay, everybody. So on today's show, we always try to pursue some of the stuff that's out and just debuted. And last year at the DKP meet, Mark Akullian's car debuted, and it was a 1961 yellow cow look bug. It took the DKP Club Choice Award and you've seen it on the cover of the 2024 Hot VW's Cow Look edition. So I wanted to welcome today Mark Akullian to the podcast. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hey, so you and I have been talking back and forth. Matter of fact, we were talking a little bit before your car was finished and came out, because we wanted to make sure that we talked about your car and got it out once the car was finished. So now we're finally sitting down to get to do the podcast. And I know that this car has been a long build process, and definitely got a lot of attention when it came out. A lot of the classic, details done to it. But of course, the way we always start the podcast is, what's your VW story and how did you get into Volkswagens?
So my first experience that I really got me going was my mom's friend came to visit, and she comes driving down the street, this long street, in a 1966 pearl white red interior Beetle, and just caught my eye, and I was in awe. And she, take me around the block, and when she would come to visit, and I would just enjoy riding around in that thing. And like all 7-year-olds do, I guess, is you ride way in the back, and just fell in love with the sound and the smells, and just the aura about that Volkswagen.
And now, as you get a little bit older, are you like the bugs on your radar since you're young and impressionable like that?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of us, you always in the cars and stuff, and I was always intrigued. Always got toys in the form of cars, automotive, anything like that. And so yeah, and then I had older brother and his buddies were all into Volkswagens too. So kind of got the vibe on that.
And where are you growing up at this time?
So I grew up in Irvine, California, up in Turtle Rock, which is stone's throw away from, like most people know, the Orange County Fairgrounds or OCIR, or even Irvine Meadows Amphitheater. So right in the epicenter of SoCal there.
And then obviously you're growing up. You're in high school. What year did you graduate?
I was class of 87.
Oh yeah. So you're right there in the thick of the whole 80s VW. I mean, that's really the height of Volkswagens, is like from 84 to 87 was like the magazines were the thickest. Everything was going nuts. And I think everything peaked right around 89 or 90, So obviously you're down there in the hotbed of things. What's the first Volkswagen you buy?
So I got a 1957 oval window ragtop, about my late 14, almost 15 years old, and my mom bought it for me to keep me busy in the garage, and so I was just cutting loose in the garage on it.
What do you got to pay for that 57 when you got it?
I was looking at the old Auto Trader ad a few months ago, and it was advertised for like $4,000.
Wow.
And I think we got it for $2,800.
Well, Mom knew how to negotiate, huh?
Yeah, my brother and his buddies came along. Yeah, they came along and picked it apart, and of course my eyes are bigger than my head. Just my mind's just spinning on what I want to do to it. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big deal for your first car to step up and just pick up an oval right out of the gate.
Yeah. And, I didn't really have a specific, I just wanted a car. There was I lost my father about that time. So my mom was trying to, keep my focus on things, and she knew I loved cars, and she's like, okay, give something Mark to chew on and keep him busy. And
right.
So, and I was like, yeah, just, I didn't care if it was a Super Beetle or if it was a Baja or what it was, but I think my brother and his friends kind of had a little influence because they knew what I liked. All the pictures I developed, I had this little 110 Instamatic camera. So I had a bunch of pictures, and the pictures proved what really caught my eye, and it really was the cow look, hot street car thing that I really wanted. So
Yeah, and that was really the time then, because I have a car that's built in the 80s. I own Future Shock, and that car, it seemed that in the 80s it was like, because there was the mini truck craze going on at the same time, and that was kind of the competition for Volkswagens, right? Like the mini truck guys and the VW guys. And there was this thing where it was like, how modern could you make your Volkswagen and yet keep it a Volkswagen, like power windows or center consoles and, all that kind of stuff. So it was a different vibe of the whole scene, like the whole 80s look,
Oh yeah, for sure. And a little backstory on that was, I was so heavily influenced to the early stripped down, dechromed, fast, simplified car that's what I was building, and that's the way it was turned. The first version turned out that way, and then once I was 16, 17 and hitting all the shows, Johnny Speed and Chrome, and the magazines were coming out, and Pete Engel was making all these crazy interiors. I'm like, I got to do that. So then my car, I went sideways. That's the way I went. I got influenced by the flashy 80s, and it was very powerful. It was, it went 4-wheel disc brakes, and you're right. We tried to make those modern full big sound system. I had a mini truck sound system in my car, with an Empey 3-piece roll cage.
Yeah. And so what were you doing with so what'd you have for sounds in that car back in the day?
Oh, so I had, I hate to admit it, but we cut the dash and we put
I love it. I love it. That's the 80s, man. Cut it up.
Cut it up. We put a Blah Punk pull-out stereo in it.
Of course.
And then so it had I forget what the crossover was, but it was a big crazy crossover that you could dial in, and equalizer. But I had Orion amps, the two of the small, like, I forget what they were, like a shorter square.
Yeah.
And then I had the longer ones, and then I had what we called the skateboard amp. It was like a 900 watt crazy thing, and that was hooked up to some Kefs. I don't know if you remember what Kefs were.
Yeah.
They were that flat, giant 12 by 6 subwoofer.
Oh yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, so it was pretty modern at the time for, Kefs just came out, and that, the Orion amps were, kind of the.
Yeah, that's the whole ticket. I mean, the Orion amps were the way to go. I mean, I've got my chop top, my red car that I'm redoing, and that car came with all Fosgate stuff. And so I've been on this hunt for like original punch amps and all this stuff, which I'm starting to kind of rebuild a system similar to what would have been in that car. But, and then this car that you're talking about that you had, it was actually featured in Hot VWs. You said in 1988, April of 88.
Correct. Yeah. There was an off-road issue. April 88, it was featured, and Michael Sommer shot it, and it had big K-Well turbo motor in it, polished alloys. It was dechromed, one-piece windows. It was a pretty neat car, but it was its second incarnation of it. The first incarnation was more of a stripped down, simple cowlook car, but still very held its own. It had a K-Well Weber motor in it at first.
Now, how'd you and so K-Well was like the man back then, and how did you come across deciding to do a turbo? Because a lot of guys weren't doing turbo stuff back then.
Right. Well, so I grew up in Irvine, Turtle Rock area, and everyone can remember Mike Mabey's Carmen Ghia. That was a best of show, America's Most Beautiful Car, and it had a K-Well motor, and he ran it. So he was also from Irvine, and he lived in the same housing area as in University Park is my brother's good friend Kalani Gohara,
Mm-hmm.
Now, so my first, we talked about my first impression on a VW, my mom's friend 66. So Kalani had this 66 Carmen Ghia that was early cow look. We're talking de-chromed Porsche chromies, and painted a GMC burgundy. We called it the Burgundy Bullet. Well, it had a KWell 1835 in it. That was the first fast Volkswagen that just scared the hell out of me, and just had kept me with a grin from ear to ear. And I knew that, okay, this is what I want. And that was, he would come and he would pick me up. I'd be walking home from grade school, and he would pick me up and drive me home in the thing. And
oh, really?
So this was way before I had my own car, right? And I said, because I was going to the Buggins, they were taking me to the Buggins as a little kid and dragging me along.
And what was his name again?
His name was Kalani Gohara.
All right, I'm about to look the car up.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it was I don't know if it was ever featured. I got some pictures, but it was it was, once again, back then it was just, the streets were filled with these clean, stripped down, painted cars, simple wheels, big motors, simple interiors, and just that's what really that's what lights my eye up when I see, when I think about a cowlick bug. But so yeah, Kalani's car was. So anyways, I'd be in the back seat of that thing going down to a KWell shop as a 12, 13-year-old, and with maybe's Ghia. Wow, he was the talk of the town, that
Sure.
street sweeper thing. And there was, and then the magazines. So I had my own subscription to Hot VWs, and, I got the Three Wheeling magazine sent to me when it came out. And so, yeah, I would read those things from cover to cover. And
then the first time when you got the car, your oval, it was black, you said?
No, that wasn't black. So it was originally that typical repainted seafoam green you would call,
okay.
Kinda, it had all white painted smoothies on it, lowered in the front, 1700 cc in it with some Weber ICTs, and just a stock interior with stock wheel, just a very simple cowlick starter. And
then so you had, one of the things you said, and this is back in '87, is you had 4-wheel discs on that car, which was that wasn't super common back then. Like in the mid '80s, disc brakes, like rear disc brakes especially, I don't even think came really popular until like later in the late '90s. So many of those cars were. I mean, it was a few people that made the rear disc brake setup, so that car was pretty cutting edge. So you had, that car was on, it was originally on adapters, and then you converted it to the bolt-on, like the drilled 51130, or it was 4-wheel disc brakes when you first did the brakes on it?
So when I first built the car when I was 15, I did the Ghia front disc brakes, drilled them for 911 alloys, ran some 4.5, so it had basically Ghia spindles on it.
Mm-hmm.
And with the drilled 911 pattern, 4.5s. And then the rear, I had the adapters, and I had 5.5s on it. And that had a BK transmission in it. It was basically a stock gear ratio built transmission, 185s, 135s with the IDA motor. And it worked great. But then when I built the second incarnation of it a few years later, blew the car apart, started from the pan, being painted body color, did the 914 caliper conversion kit. I think it was Gary Avis or Repart or somebody had a 914 kit where you could run the calipers with the parking brake cables.
Yeah.
So it was that setup, and I can't remember whose kit it was, but you're right. I think that was maybe the first and only kit available that was set up for the street back then.
Yeah, it was a pretty rare kit. I do remember that for sure.
Yeah, and you had to take the Type 3, rear hubs and turn them down, and drilling for the 911 pattern, and that adapted the 914 rotor hat to it, and then the caliper was fabricated.
And now you showed that car. When did you get tapped to be in the magazine for that car?
So I was in this car club called Volkswagen Strasse of Costa Mesa that Michael Summer.
Dude, I remember that Volkswagen Strasse club. All the dudes had like deeps on the back of their cars. I remember seeing all those dudes at the Classic, like in Costa Mesa, and I was like, "What's with this Volkswagen Strasse club?" All these dudes had like deep dish center lines in the back of their car. Like it was, were those guys all about like fast street cars, or what was their story?
Yeah, when I was in it for the 6 months, because I was short lived, it was more of a bunch of new wave party goers. Yeah, they were into street cars, not into drag racing, or it was more of a party, like it, because 80s was a party, and
right.
Like club president had a convertible Rabbit, and one of the other guys had another Rabbit that was kind of fast, and you had Tim Rushmore he worked at Kimco. He had a really cool car, and then he built a ragtop. You had Jim, I forget Jim's last name. He had a black oval with 14-inch alloys, and like he had aluminum fender beating and stuff. So it's just, it was still cowlick, but yeah, there was a few other late models. There was a few other guys with center lines, and a lot of late model cars too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Rabbits and GTI, stuff like that.
Yeah. And like I said, I was only in the club. It was in high school. Like, I think I was a senior. Maybe I was a senior in high school. Anyways, long story short, Michael Summer was in the club, and he knew that the build was, he knew the car when I first built it, and he was watching it being built the second time. So he was like, okay, as soon as you're done with it, we're going to shoot it. And so that's how, that was when, that's how we decided to put it in the magazine, and that's how that came about.
So how was it? What was the experience like getting your car in the magazine?
It was pretty cool. It was, it was a little different back then, because the transition between the early cowlick stuff and the 80s stuff, and God, I can't really put my finger on it. It was cool. I got recognition in the club flyer as I was leaving the club, and I when I went to events, I just went there and just laid low and enjoyed it. It wasn't like it is today, where there's a lot of social media, and you really didn't know how it took and all that, but it got recognition. It wasn't, and I don't build stuff for that, so maybe I didn't pay attention enough to be able to answer that accurately.
I mean, I guess in the 80s, right? Like there were so many cars from Southern California that were in the magazine. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, no, that's cool. You got in the magazine, no big deal. From us out here in the desert, it's like one time, anytime any of us from Vegas got featured, it was like a huge deal. You know what I mean? Because we finally got to, get into one of those magazines where all the cars are from California.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that for sure. I it's funny. I would get phone calls from a few people, and they were like asking questions like, where do the wheels come from? Like, where do they come off of? Because nobody really knew too much. Well, I don't know if everyone, early alloys. I think that the late alloys was more of the
that was the thing.
The early, I know the early alloys were big all along, but you didn't see as many early alloys in the 80s as you do now, or prior even. You know?
So they were usually the flat alloys, like the flat sixes is what everybody was running, because those were the ones the Porsche guys were getting rid of, because they were putting flares on their cars and widening the track and all that good stuff. So they ditched the stockers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that was about the time when all the conversions were going. So yeah, maybe there was just because the surplus of what was available, the late ones seemed to be the ones that were picked up and put on cars. So
And then do you stay in the hobby the whole time, or do you kind of sell your car and get out of it? Like, what happens to the oval?
Yeah, no. So I've never been without a VW, and I've always had multiple. There may be one time I had only one and only very few parts. So the oval, so let's see, the oval was done. I was getting ready to go away to college. I was trying to get away to go to make myself smarter, and I wanted to get a Suburban. I was kind of wanting to do the off-road thing and get out and camp and all that. And so I sold the oval window. It went to Japan. Dino Don sold it for me with the same trip and purchase time that Bill Schwimmer's tan oval window got sold. And there's some funny stories about that too. But so it sold. I bought a Suburban, but I had already owned a 58 ragtop that I just picked up, and I had a white 66 on red stalker that I had. So I had two other VWs already in the works that I owned, and the oval was kind of, I really missed the first version of the car. The 48s, the simple interior, just the simple styling. It wasn't the flashy thing. I love the second version of that oval, but I kind of was done with it in a sense. I hate to say it. I really don't. It's not the first one I miss out of all my Volkswagens. So it sold. So after that, I went away to school for a couple years and quickly came back. I continued to go to all the swap meets and dig through the recycler and pick up parts and, buy stuff and dream and, plan out cars I want to build, buy a set of wheels, and okay, now I got to buy a car because I have a different set of wheels now type of attitude.
Right.
I kept buying dual quiet packs as the single turbo muffler was coming out. I was still trying to pick up quiet packs and run them,
Yeah. And then you go to college, you get the Suburban, you start change a little bit what you're doing. You have a VW in the back burner, and then you're involved in automotive right now. So you own Star European Service, and in Costa Mesa you do service on Mercedes and stuff like that. Do you transition into automotive work for a living at that point? Yeah.
So, college didn't work out, I didn't finish college up in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
I came back, and, in high school I had an auto shop. And Nick Misterville ran a great program, and we had ROP, Regional Occupation Program. So in high school, we worked at dealerships for a couple hours as school credit. So long story short is I worked at Toyota. A bunch of guys worked for Mercedes, and they got hired on as jobs. So when I came back, I was needing some money. I needed a job, and I started working at Budnick Billet Aluminum Wheels when he was first starting. He just left Boyd.
Oh, really?
So I was helping Lane and Alan Budnick and Sheila over there, and I made a few mistakes on the mill, and Alan was like, maybe this isn't for you. And at the time, the guys at Mercedes were like, hey, because back then you couldn't just show up at Mercedes and get a job. You had to be invited. You had to be, you had to be somebody.
Right.
Well, my buddies knew that I came back into town, and they were always looking for good, apprentices. And they're like, hey, Mark's in town. So they called me up and offered me an interview. And I was going to go a totally different route. And so I needed a job and got this job there. And I was like, wow, you can make a career out of this. And it's German cars and the engineering and the education and the tools. And I was just like, because I'm a car guy, I was making my own tools as 14, 15 years old in my garage, trying to pull a wheel bearing race off. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And here this place has all these great tools, and the tool trucks are coming and just catering to you. So I'm all in. So I took the apprenticeship there and did the 2.5 years of, actually it was about 2.5 years of apprenticeship, and became a Mercedes-Benz trained technician. So that's how that happened.
And then, so you're still working. So when you start working on cars for a living, are you still involved in cars in the aftermarket after work, stuff like that? Or you kind of get burnt out a little bit, or how's that tie in?
No. Yeah, no way. No, it fueled it. I was starting to make some good money. I met this gal, and was serious relationship, and started a family pretty early. I got married at 21.
Oh,
or I'm sorry, 23. Met her about 21, and that's about the time I started at. She's one of the reasons I came back from school, and so starting a family. Still had the passion, making decent money. I had my stock 66. Then I had all these extra parts. I built a 2175. Had a set of early alloys. I had all these parts, and bam, my 66 was now a Cowbug, original paint car. And what else did I build? And then I still, we rode dirt bikes. Then we rode quads, and then I sold the quads and started building a couple of sand rails, all VW powered sand rails. So my involvement just multiplied with the VW scene. Always had a street car, always had a 48 motor street car, going to the desert. It just evolved.
And now, a question I forgot to ask about your last car. You sold it to the people of Japan. What'd you get for that oval?
Oh, wow. So God, the number, I can't remember the number. It was like low teen. I would have to talk to Dino, because I wanted like 22 grand. And I remember Judy Cable came to me, and she's like, Mark, you're insulting these guys. They could build a pro stock car for 22 grand. And I'm like, but Judy, I have like 40 in this thing. I built it with my hands. And so I think even Komori was interested in it, but not at 22 grand. And
right.
Then that's when Dino came in, and he brokered it. I want to say I got either 13.5 or 15 grand maybe. Or even it sold for 13 or 14, and I ended up with 11.
Oh, wow.
It was one of those that you kind of, back then, anything over 8 grand in your pocket when you're 20s is
big money.
Oh man, you win the lottery, man. you forget that you put all that into it, but that was an accumulation over time. And so
you're like, finally this piggy bank is going to pay off.
Yeah, right.
So you sell that car, and then you're kind of still tinkering in the scene, doing sand rails, because you kind of go through that, right? You got kids, and so you get like dune buggies, 4-wheelers, whatever stuff that everybody can enjoy. And then when do you pick up your 61?
Not too soon after my son was born. God, the other day I put the number on it, what year it was, and it was like mid 90s, let's say.
Oh wow! How old's your son now?
So my son's 30.
Oh wow! Yeah, so you've had this car a little while.
Yeah, I've had this car about 28 years, and because I built the 66 was there. God, I don't want to bore you with the details, but there were so many other cars, and but I was buying original paint cars. And it's funny, Long Hair John and Danny Gabbard they jokingly said, they would see an unpainted all original paint car that was, and it'd be like, okay, that's an Akullian build right there.
Right.
Because it was so simple to make a nice street car. You buy the nicest stalker, bolt some wheels on it, big motor, bam, instant nice car. And because you got to remember, I was starting a family.
Yeah.
And even though I was, buying a lot of stuff and trying to stay into it, I couldn't build another, you can't drop 10 grand on a paint job when you're starting a family. So you kind of get creative on how you're going to build a really nice car. Like I bought an all original 60 convertible that used to show up at the classic, jade green, just a beautiful bone stalker. And bought that, put spindles on it, and set of flat 4 BRMs, and bam, just an instant showpiece.
And the reality is, I think a lot of us end up, we think to ourselves, well, I want to build it so I get the street cred. But the smart way to do it is the way that you're doing it. Like buy the car, as close to nice as you can. And then you just start to do your own little tweaks and mods to it, make it your own.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this thing where we feel like we got to build it or earn the street cred on doing the cars. And for some of us, it's just, we're too short-sighted to save the money to buy something that's a little nicer. So we start with, like, dude, it's only $500. That's where it all starts. And it goes wrong shortly after that, because, by the time you're into this thing where you can go buy a nice car for $7,000 or $8,000, back in the day, I mean, you're buying a pretty close to like dialed in Volkswagen, you're going to spend that within the first year just buying parts and, doing minor mods to those things. So really that's I think that's a smarter way to do it,
Yeah. And so back to the 61 California Gold car. So a good buddy of mine, he was selling this nice 63 anthracite Bug, and I'm like, okay, because I was like, okay, I gotta build my 70s era correct Cal Look car, because everyone's building these cars, and I'm like, I want to build this. I've missed out on a bunch of set of BRMs over the years, and I still want to build that car I wanted in high school, and
right.
And got sidetracked. So I went to his house to look at this thing. I was gonna buy it, had a pocket full of cash, and in the garage, I'm like, what's that? And he's like, oh, that's a rag top I'm kind of piecing together. And so pan was powder coated, had a Harold Carter from Gardner's Gearbox Shop, Berg 5-speed in it. It had 356 brakes, had a set of flat 4 BRMs on it. It had boxes of rubber and a few pieces. It was painted. It had this, halfway decent paint job on it. And I'm like, well, how much is that one? And it was the same number as the stock anthracite 63. So back to what you're saying is, I'm like doing the math, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to blow this 63 down to the shell and pan and start buying parts. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, that thing's got 12 grand worth of parts on it, and it's still a decent shell, right? So
right.
Money's better spent on that thing when it's going to look like that in a few weeks in my garage anyways. No brainer. So I buy this other one instead, and which is the car I have today. And I was money ahead. Now that car, you would think I was just going to be put together really quickly. I get it home, blow it apart, and not saying it was a bad car or anything. It's just nowhere near, that there was a lot. It wasn't to the level that I was planning on building a car, let's say. So blew everything apart. The 5-speed went into my 67 because I had already purchased the 5-speed gearbox kit. I already bought a Berg's 86 stroke. I'd already been buying parts to build this ultimate, 70s era correct car that I wanted to build. So I was like, I just multiplied in parts. And so there's quite a bit on this car that came with it in a sense, but I even replaced the doors on the car because the doors had rust in them and they were patched, not the best. And Danny's like, just find me another set of doors. And so every nut and bolt, every square inch of this car, even down to the pan was stripped back down and repowder coated, and changed, just went through everything on the car. So, but
now when you started this build, did you have paint, because you've got a lot of custom work on the deck lid. It looks like a fiberglass deck lid, but it's actually a steel deck lid, right, on that car?
Correct.
And so there's a lot of custom fab work done to it. Did you have, you had a plan, color, motor, what was your game plan in the beginning when you started with this car?
I had a vision. I had a gut feeling. I did not have, nothing was 100%. It did evolve with a plan. I had a just, even in the magazine, Shin snapped a picture of my high school drawing, my sketch I had. And I just had this vision, this vibe, even the color, people, the color is, people call it yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those controversial colors. Either you love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
I didn't set out to build a yellow car. I had this gut feeling. I had this image of what a cowlick bug is about. And when I'm driving it, how I'm going to feel when I'm driving it. I didn't build it for anyone else, but I wanted to build it to a traditional spirit that I was first influenced by. So I did. I had this, it had to be, there must have been 20, 30 shades of paint. And I call it shades. I don't like calling them colors because there's a million shades to every color. So I just had this shade of paint, a vibe. And so that was the driving force. And it evolved and because it took 28 years to build, it did evolve even up until the last year that I built it. It's if you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The vision never changed, but as time passed, if I would have rushed this car and built it in 5 years, it would not look like this one. It would be something completely different.
Right.
Because even the plaid material, I had made up my mind 3 or 4 times prior on what the interior was going to be. And by accident, I found this, I was going through swatches and ordering swatches, and I saw that the plaid material in that color, and I'm like, no, it's too white. I don't want another Pete Engel white interior like my oval. And the lady, she's like, she goes, you have 5 more samples I can send you. I'm like, send me whatever. So she sends me the gray plaid from the Chevrolet, and I opened it up. I'm like, what's this thing? Oh, that's the gray. It looked totally different in person, right? You got to look at it. And, I threw it next to the car after it was painted. And I walked out in the garage because I would do that. You throw it over there. So when you walk by it one day, it catches your eye and the answer is either yes or no. I walked by and I'm like, it looked like it looked like a checkerboard interior. I'm like, checkers, it worked. And I'm like, that's it. So, and that I picked that right up until a couple of years ago. So
and now you've got a myriad of kind of rare accessories on this car. So what all is rare stuff that you collected set to the side specifically for this build?
So the Talbot outside mirror,
mm-hmm.
for sure. I got that at Dunkel Brothers Porsche meet, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30, 25 years ago.
That's a long-term purchase. This is going on my car when I'm done.
Yeah. Even the inside rear view mirror was a purchase. That, not many people notice, but Aronson's white car on the cover, it's a half nickel, half black plastic inside rear view mirror. When I found one of those, I'm like, that's gonna go in my car. The Lucas lights, I've collected Lucas lights over the years. I think this pair has been in my possession for about 18, 20 years. The front license plate brackets, something that's been on my cars since high school. A lot of NOS stuff. So I can't, I used to be able to go into Bugs for You back in the day, and I would be able to go in the back and dig through the bins and, buy NOS parts, like door handles, front hood handle. The tack, that was a tack that I got I believe I got it from Kimco or somebody. way back in the 80s.
Now the tack
And
is in the place of the Speedo, right?
correct.
And what kind of tack is it?
So it's out of a Puma GT out of Brazil.
Oh, really?
And it's the first version Puma tack. It's a white needle. Most all the Pumas have like black needle, like more modern video style gauges. So it's a pretty rare piece. Even one of the old Puma guys noticed it many years ago when I had it, because I was asking him about another gauge, and I go, "Oh, look at this thing I got." And he's like, "Whoa, where'd you get that?" So that's a pretty rare piece, I think, unless all of a sudden they start surfacing and someone calls my bluff, I guess. But I got that. That's a tack. I'm like, okay, there's 100 different tacks we can do, 100 different ways I can do the dashboard. And I was going to do something with an aluminum dash, but then I'm like, no, I can't cut up a dash. I like the stock dash. So so that was something. The 48s, those are my first set of 48s I ever on my first engine from back when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
That I've kept over the years. Yeah. So, collection. What else have I collected for that car? That shifter. I think I have to go back and study it. I proved myself wrong, but I think that's my first Berg shifter I ever purchased. And I've had several others. And so I had converted it to, I had other ones. I can't remember quite, but when I bought my 5-speed kit, I brought it to them, and I think it was already a locker. And then I brought it in and they made it a 5-speed locker.
And now, so the car's got a Berg 5-speed in it. What's in it for motor?
It's an 86 94, so 23 87, whatever it is, and Berg crank. Another one of those purchases. Back in the 90s, I would go to Berg's and I would bring, I went in there, and I think after I'd already picked out what gear ratios and everything, kind of with Jim Kaforsky, about what I wanted as a combination. And I saved up my money, and I went in and bought the whole rotating assembly from Gene. I walked in, I said, all right, I'm on my lunch hour, let's spend some money, and sat down and ordered up the 86 Porsche Capri Journal crank, and from pulley nut all the way to gland nut, flywheel, clutch, and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so it's and it was a 86 90 and a half, and I ran it, I built it and put it together, and I built it, and then George Jimenez helped me do a fine tune because I screwed up the cam, and we put it together. But I ran it in my 67 with the 5-speed for many years, and then I broke a head stud, and now it's a 94 millimeter piston that Ron Fleming helped me redo the motor on it, the combination. So, but even the intake manifolds, you couldn't get the scat tracks anymore, but Gene had a stash, and I developed a little bit of a good relationship with him. And I'm like, yeah, I need some scat track manifolds. I wish I could find them. And he goes, hold on a second. And he comes out of the back and looks around the corner and comes back out, and he goes, well, I have these right here, new old stock manifolds. So, that was kind of a cool little find there.
Yeah. And
but
then the linkage on the motor, what type of linkage is that?
That's all my handiwork. I made that all myself. The arms, the little out arms are Dave from Proformance, when he was on Tustin Avenue, the old auto house, a really good friend of mine, and buy a lot of parts from him. He had this Rabbit side draft Weber manifold, and had this linkage on it, and those arms, I'm like, those would work I'm looking for something like that. So we don't know where he got them from, but he goes, I can get those arms for you. So he bought those arms for me. I got them, and I bought the cross shaft. I whittled out the little aluminum plates that bolt to the carburetors, and we just got some Heims, and I just kind of dreamt it up, and it's been on quite a few engines. It's evolved a little bit. That was home.
It's a unique setup with the Heims and everything on it. I mean, it's kind of a slick look, and it looks like it's pretty solid, like not a lot of movement, because that's really the problem with a lot of linkage pieces is there's so much movement in the linkages. It's like your carbs go out of tune pretty quick.
Correct. I've had a few R&D hiccups and stuff, and but yeah, like if you look at it, it hasn't like an inboard springs with some collars to keep it centered. So when the engine's warm and it's stretched out, that's when I set the end play where there's very little slop side to side.
Mm-hmm.
The crossbar is titanium and it's very flexible. So when you stomp on it, that bar flexes just a tiny bit, and the Heims help it flex, and it seems to help center itself up with equal pressure. It kind of gives a little bit rather than just being, it's loose in some areas where it needs to be, and it's tight in the other areas where it needs to be, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, that's a problem sometimes with the bell crank linkage that I have, is like as the idle of the motor starts going up or the motor warms up, it ends up being it starts to idle a little bit high because the motor starts expanding and they're fixed, and it starts to pull the idle open a little bit. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about with thermodynamics when the motor starts to expand. And now on this car, what are you running for brakes on this car?
This has Porsche 356B drum brakes all the way around, front and rear.
And how do those stop compared to like discs?
They stop wonderful. They have a good tight feel. For me to compare them to discs, I actually prefer them. I prefer drum brakes only because I'm a mechanic, and I like to adjust stuff, and I can feel when something's a little bit out of adjustment. I can get in there, make some adjustments. Whereas like disc brakes are always, they're pretty much self-sufficient.
Right.
And you deal with, residual pressure. Like some master cylinders have, people always say, well, you got to have residual pressure valves, or you don't need residual pressure valves. And with all the different combinations of calipers, you get different feels. And so as far as putting a set together, I put plenty of sets on cars, customer cars, friends' cars. I just like a drum brake. It's more it's barbaric, if you will, or
yeah, a little
less techy.
Right, a little anti-tech brake setup. So you've got the disc brake, or you've got the drum brakes, the Porsche 356 drum brakes, and then the wheels on it. Those are original BRMs.
Yes, yeah, they're original mag. Speedwell BRM mags. And
how long did you get those?
I got them several years ago. I got them from a good friend of mine on another well-known street car, Dave Mason, his black ragtop.
Oh, okay.
They were on his car, and so I joked saying that it's the fastest set of original BRM mags, because his car was pretty dang fast running nitrous.
Yeah.
So they're the fastest set of BRMs on the street right now. So,
so what did he run with that car?
God, I don't know. I forget his best time. We'll have to get him on a podcast and let him tell us the stories. But
yeah, for sure.
I know that anytime there's a talk about a fast street car, he's like, well, let's line them up. Who wants to be second first?
Right. Well, I dig it. So he had a set of the BRMs, and then he kind of saved them to the side for you. And I'm sure they probably weren't cheap if you bought them within the last. I mean, shoot, they haven't been cheap for a long time. I mean, It's not something that you run across every day as a set of BRMs, original BRMs.
Yeah. So how I acquired them is, I have this. His daily driver was a '77 bus, and when he would go on long road trips, I would throw him the keys to my Mercedes, my E-Class, and he was a good buddy. You want to have him safe on the road, so he would borrow it all the time. And then he was going to relocate years later up to Oregon, and he's like, "Hey, I know you want my wheels. I want your Mercedes, and I want your O'Cross 78 crank with flywheel and just Rimco super rods and a few other trinkets, and let's trade." So I was like, "Let's do it," without even thinking twice. So I didn't have to cash out for him. He got what he needed. I got what I wanted. So it worked out well. And, I couldn't get the yes out of my mouth fast enough because, I missed out on previously twice I've missed out on BRMs over the years. Even all the way back to my first car when I was 16.
Yeah.
So I had a set of BRMs that eluded me. There's a guy up in Crestline, Mark Dentise. He had a couple of VWs. He had a '63 convertible that was in Hot VWs. It was called Day Cruiser. Really cool buckskin tan convertible, center lines. But he had a black oval, and he had BRMs. And I went up to visit him because that's where my friend's family's cabin was, and knew Mark. And so I couldn't wait when I got my car done to drive up to show him. And I pull up, and he goes, "I want your Porsche alloys."
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, "Trade me for my BRMs." I knew one was cracked, and I didn't care. And he goes, "We'll put them on right now." And I'm like, okay, yeah. But the problem was I had the Ghia front disc brakes with the 911 bolt pattern studded. The rear was no problem because I just unbolt the adapters and bolt the BRMs on. But if I could have bolted on the BRMs on the front that day, I would have driven down the hill with a set of BRMs, and I would have been a 16-year-old kid with BRM mags that was unobtainable back then.
Yeah, I mean they've been quite rare for a long time. I mean, when the red chop top that I have has them, and he told me that back in '88 he paid $800 for the set, which in '88 $800 is like two grand today. You know what I mean? I mean that was a lot of money, especially when you were buying VW wheels, because you go to the store and buy a wheel for $50. So I mean it's crazy how much they've always sold for a ton of money. And I think when I pulled mine off, all of them had been welded and all that stuff already. So, find a nice set, man. That's a pretty tall feat. Now, after you've got, and who did paint and body on it?
Danny Gabbard of Gab Fab. He did all the metal work and all the paint and body.
And then that deck lid. Tell me a little bit about the deck lid. So you kind of emulated the Empey deck lid a little bit?
Yeah, so Danny's doing all the metal work, and we're doing it, and I want an Empey eyebrow gill deck lid. So I had this fiberglass one. It was new old stock, or I can't remember if it was a flat 4 reproduction or if it was a genuine Empey. I got it from one of the guys at Bugs For You.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring it over to Danny's. I go, "Here's the deck lid. Get this thing fitted. I want to take the factory metal hinges. I want it to hinge like a factory one, everything." And he goes, "We're not putting a fiberglass." Excuse me. He goes, "We're not going to put a fiberglass deck lid on this car. This thing's all metal finish, no Bondo." And he goes, "Well, how about I can make the gills out of metal." And I go, "Well, let's do it." And then I go, "I even have this badge. I have an original Empey Globe badge." And I go, "Let's put this on it." And so he made the tooling to recess the oval globe a little bit, kind of French it in a little bit, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
So we got kind of creative. We were going to do, we really didn't know how it was going to turn out. I know I asked him, I go, hey, he was showing me the pattern. I go, well, it looks different because the eyebrow starts up higher. He goes, well, the structure's there. We can't do it. And I'm like, okay, well, just do it, so let's see how it turns out. And that's the first one that he did. And he's done many more after this. And I think everyone's a little different, which is cool because it's like a piece of art, if you will.
Well, yeah, they're all handmade, so they can't, they're all going to vary quite a bit, I would think, especially with the varying details. But I think it's it's got a it's got a good look to it. You blacked out the pop out windows, so you kept the pop out windows instead of doing a stationary window in the back. You ended up doing a pop out, and then you did all the trim around the windows black. What made you do that?
Just staring at the hundreds of Cal-Look cars and seeing what made me say yes or no. And I like the clean look. I like the contrast of a little bit of stainless and chrome. And, Danny also told me, he's like, hey, you want stuff to just disappear. And I was debating pop out or one-piece windows also, and I'm like, no, I have to do vent wings because I was trying to build an era correct mid-70s car. One-piece door glass was not out yet except for an early split window, which I wanted to do early split window doors on it just because of that, just to do something really different. Have a 61 ragtop with split window one-piece window doors on it. Like I really wanted to do that, and I had a set of doors lined up, and he's like, "No, that's just too stupid." And I go, "You're right." Aronson's car on the cover had vent wings. I'm going vent wings. It's proper. That I didn't want to go too custom, right?
Right.
So the attitude was to, an aluminum frame pop out would have stuck out like a white wall tire, if you will, if it wasn't painted black. And then, the vent wings too. Spent a lot of time picking out the right shade of semi-gloss, flat, whatever have you, so you don't look at it and see a shiny black window frame. You see it just disappears like a piece of rubber.
Right.
So there's a lot of thought going into that. And just wanted that clean lines. I love a D-chrome car. I went back and forth about trim on the running board. The trim on the running board was purposely kept because, first of all, the stainless doesn't pop it doesn't jump out at you like a bright dip, bright dip was the aluminum coating that a lot of those cars were they weren't stainless back then.
Yeah.
But polished stainless picks up the light differently, it picks up the ground, and it disappears more. So it kind of adds an accent line to the car, and it ties in with the stainless handle, the chrome trim rings, the polished stainless Talbot Berlin mirror, and
it's just enough to tie it all together.
Yeah, and then like if you notice the pop out latches are still chrome, and then even the rivets I sourced even up a couple years ago. I found a guy that had new old stock pop out latch rivets on the Samba, and I bought them. So I purposely, my one buddy's like, just paint everything black. Why are you worrying about the latches and the rivets? I go, well, you need that little contrast, and so the blacked out frame with the little stainless polished rivets in the chrome latch. And then if you notice the door pop out wing windows, everything's black, but the NOS latches are still all chrome. So I purposely went, every piece has its little accent to it to give it a little break. So when you step back and you look at the whole package, nothing looks out of place, nothing looks overdone, nothing looks forgotten.
Yeah, it's important to get that right balance, because sometimes, like, there's people that have started to drill stuff when the fluting stuff came in, like the speed drilling on things, and then next thing you know, they're drilling every stinking thing in the car, and it just goes way too far. and it just loses its intended look of sportiness, and it just looks like someone went crazy with a drill press on the car, So now you've got the Empey wheel in there, the Gen 1 airbag. It's got the gigantic horn button on there, the leather wrapped one.
Yeah, for sure. And once again, that was a purchase right up until a few months before I debuted the car. I have 4 other steering wheels that were going in it, and I was trying to figure out which one I was going to do. And from a Superior 5, I have a new old stock 15-inch Superior 500 that's got the chrome spokes on it with all the holes in it. Just a period correct piece, and it looks great. I have a little 14-inch wood GT wheel that I've had in a bunch of different cars. And then I came across this one, or reached out to a guy, and I go, I've always really liked that wheel. And as the car was coming together, every wheel I had was getting less and less of a yes. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I always liked that one wheel, and I go, okay, I got to find one. So I reached out to find a new old stock one, and I had to pay the money for it. But once again, I felt it was something that was needed to tie the car together. And I thought they were leather wrapped myself until I purchased it, but it's it's a vinyl injected. It's one of the early versions, I guess, when they were starting to manufacture that, but very, very good quality that they did back then. And, but yeah, it's,
so the stitching is like a thread. It's like a thread embossing on there.
Yeah, it's a cast. Like it's like a hard vinyl rubber. Like the stitching is actually part of the. I guess it's like the McRib. You know.
It all just comes as one part. So the first time you debut the car is where?
So DKP's Friday afternoon bug-in night before the bug-in weekend cruise. Their little deal. I literally finished it that morning. Was renting a place, a warehouse down the street in Yorba Linda, and up for several nights. I was going through a lot of moves and stuff, and I said, forget it, I'm finishing my car. And I literally, we were putting the car together the night before. Mm-hmm. Got a little bit of rest, came in, went to the shop, aired up the tires, triple checked everything. And the first time I drove that car up to a stoplight and drove through a stoplight completed, was on my way to the DKP cruise for that bugging event.
Now, were you keeping the car under wraps the whole time, like trying to keep it real low key so nobody would see it until you debuted it?
No, not so much. Because it took so long. Mm-hmm. It's actually the opposite. I think over the years, and I kind of got a little sick of it, and I kind of almost stopped. I never stopped going to events, but I go to events and they're like, is your car done yet? Hey, where's your car? Like, people knew it. People are anticipating it. There was lots of pictures of it. I would post pictures of little corner shots here and there. Nobody knew. I guess it got to the point where people stopped asking me and let their guard down and not really expecting it. So a little bit of that surprise where when I drove it in, I think a lot of people were like, oh, okay, wow, what a shock,
Yeah, it's finally done.
It was finally done. A lot of people knew about it, but not everybody knew about it. Still a lot of people that I thought had already seen it are like, oh, you finished your car? And so I debuted it there. And another funny story is a couple people walked up and they go, hey, that's not a 67. Because everyone's used to seeing my ratty old black street car with the 5-speed and the DC&F engine with the flat 4 BRMs on it. And those people, when I talked about, yeah, I'm almost done with my car, I'm trying to finish my car, they thought that car was the one I was building.
Oh, really?
So that was, yeah, because I have a couple other cars that I take to events, and so that's kind of a cool little a little shock to people, a little surprise, but yeah, that was.
You debut it at the DKP meet, and then they end up giving you the award for the club, like the club pick. Is that what it was?
Yeah, the DKP Club Choice,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I think is what it is. Yeah, their choice award. So that's that makes you feel good.
Yeah, and they usually give it to cars that like just debut. Like if you're debuting there, and it's something new, because that over the past decade has become kind of the thing, right? You debut your car at the DKP meet before the show starts, and it's kind of become the thing on classic weekend, and then the classics sometimes here, sometimes not. So it's kind of, and there's a lot of stuff now going on with the classic weekend now, SoCal VW month or year, whatever they got going on now. It's quite a undertaking, but
yeah, and one of the guys in the club would talk to him years ago, and there's been some talk about it, but they're like, hey, why don't you recognize a few other cars? And they said, hey, we don't want to have our own car show here. It was meant to be a casual thing. Hey, look at all these people that are showing up to our cruise night. This is cool. We should give back to some. We should pick a car that would be what I guess the question they ask themselves is, what car would you want to jump in and drive home that fits the club,
right?
Vibe, if you will. So that's, I believe I'm speaking for them, but maybe I'm out of place, but that's what I took, that's what they look for. So they have to keep an open mind about what the club is, and then what car really grabs you that you'd want to jump in and take to the events and go grab a burger in or something.
Right. Yeah. It's some people think like it's the best car there, or it's this or it's that, but the reality is they pick it based on what they like as far as cars go, which makes sense, because it's a DKP meet. So it usually follows like the cowlook style, like that's what they're into, and there's nothing wrong with that. So
yeah, they don't want to be judging the best car, because that's on Sunday at the classic or the bug-in. That's where the big car show judge would be, right? So
well, yeah, and it also it takes away from it being a DKP meet, because it's kind of a DKP meet where other cars show up, So I think it's I think it's fitting that car took the prize over there, because it is a quintessential traditional cow look. It ticks all the boxes for everything that you're looking for in a cow look car. And so now, is the car 100% done to you?
Yeah, it is, and there's there's a few things I think I would want to change, because I do have a lot of options to do things to, and I haven't yet. I'm happy with the car the way it is, 100%. I love jumping in it and enjoying it. I still walk by the car sometimes, and I'm like, whose is that?
Right. It's too nice. Like, man, it's so nice. It's such a nice car, and it was so long in the build process that sometimes, I get what you mean. I've got a car that's been it's been in the restoration process for quite a while, and sometimes I even forget that I have it. It's been it's so long and going, and I've got other cars, but then that's the problem too when you're building like kind of a high end builder car. It ends up turning into kind of a big project where like midway through you might say, oh, I think I want to change this to that, or shift this to that, or let's make this minor adjustment. And then sometimes you make one step forward and two steps back. So it's all part of the build process, right? But I mean, I guess if you want it to be your car, that's really what it takes.
Sure, sure. And that's part of the, you know, I've been very fortunate to have quite a few cars to satisfy other tastes on. I was, being disciplined with this build to be a traditional, mid 70s era car that, a period correct to where if it was built back in the day, it's hard to put a number on or put a timestamp on when it was built.
Mm-hmm.
But it answers a style, like a traditional, it's not 100% to the cars that were in the pages back there, because there's a few things that, may or may not have, but I tried to be as disciplined as I could to make decisions to have it turn out to be a specific era build. That makes sense. And but like the front license plate bracket, it's been on every car I've had since I got a ticket in high school in my oval window. And like Mark Thurber's brown car with the BRMs, there's a picture of it I always loved the way that front license plate looked like it was floating, because I got a front license plate ticket when I was 16 and a half in Newport Beach, and just ruined my cruise night because we would cruise the beach, and I'm like, guy's picking on me for a stupid license plate. So it's a whole story about that. And I there's a couple pictures where it's not on there that I took, and I'm like, God, it looks clean without it. But then it's a purposely placed thing. So I have another set of wheels I could throw on it. I probably will at some point.
No way. Drive it with the BRM. Listen, my brother told me this. You better get another set of BRMs and cruise it with that on there, man. Don't be driving those original BRMs. Where I'm like, no, bro. Legends drive original BRMs. Just drive it with the BRMs, man. It's only money. It's only money. You just go buy another one if you can find one. But hey, just watch for potholes.
Oh God, yeah.
Those things will ruin your day and cost you about $1,000 if you bust one. If you could even find a single BRM for $500 anymore.
Yeah, no, you're dropping $3, $4, or $5 for a wheel. I think nowadays, if we, because now people are, not going to let go of them because they know they can't get them back. So
yeah, that's nuts. Well, so do you drive the car now? I mean, are you putting some miles on it? Is your plan to drive it, or it's so nice you don't want to see it get chipped up and stuff like that?
Yeah, heck no. I love driving it. I'll take it to lunch to go get a burger with greasy hands, and I'll clean up as best as I can because it sits here at the shop. And I've taken it to Irwindale twice. From which 80 mile round trip. There was another event out, Dave Galassi's place. He did the horsepower festival, took it out there. He's right by Irwindale. I take it out and try and take it to any and all events possible. I just love driving it. And a couple of times I went to the cruise into the new year with DKK, and mm-hmm. I pull in, and as I'm cruising through, everybody's there already, and as I'm driving by, someone yells out, "It's about time you showed up!" And I chirp back. I'm like, I took the long way.
Yeah, no, and you've got that 5-speed in there, so you've got a nice tall fourth gear. That thing just cruises on the freeway.
Absolutely, yeah. Jim Kaforski, he's the guru with drivability and combinations, and yeah, I told him what size diameter tire I was going to have. I wanted a 412 ring and pinion. We had an idea of what camshaft and RPM and displacement and horsepower I was going to have, and got the degree wheel, got the wheel gear chart out, and picked the gearing on it. And so yeah, it's got a stock fourth in it for the fifth. So the thing, I think it's at 78, 80 miles an hour. It's buzzing at 3,100 RPM, right where, that's the happy cooling RPM, I believe is what everyone says. And so I get on the freeway, get it up to 3,100 RPM because I don't have a speedo in it. I just got a tachometer, And that other gauge is a cylinder head temp gauge from Empey back in the day. And whether now that we have iPhone GPS on Waze or something, you can see how fast you're going. But I drive it for sound and engine RPM, and it's a dream. It's a dream to drive. It's so tight, quiet with those uber rare Berg quiet packs that I got from Gary Berg. He had an old stash of mufflers and pipes and stuff that Tiger put together for him that I picked up several years ago.
Now those Berg quiet packs, were those like what Dino's doing right now with the Jeep mufflers and stuff like that, or what were those all about?
Yeah, so Gene Berg was very resourceful. Like when he was doing stuff, and he all those early pioneer guys would, like Dino, and when they would build shifters, and they would all work together. And I don't know the whole story about there's guys that know the full story on all the exhaust timeline and all that. But so Gene purchased like a container full of Jeep mufflers, old surplus. Like he went to a surplus, and now there was different versions of those mufflers that you could still buy. There was high flow ones for V8s. There was the ones for 4 cylinders. There was ones, there was all different combos. And if you even look in the old ads in Hot VWs, you could see the can had a stamping number on it. And I would not know what those numbers are, but you'd have to have a catalog. But they were just a Jeep muffler, and there was different ones. And the particular ones that are on this car are the high flow ones. They were probably your V8 one for, that needed to be less restrictive. And because the big shake on quiet packs was, they were limited to about 200 horsepower on the dyno.
Right.
And back in the day, if you had 140, 160 horsepower engine, that's what they were running on the racetrack.
Oh yeah.
So the muffler wasn't restrictive as the standard of the build on the engine. So now if you're not making 220, 230 on the dyno on a street motor, you're not the top dog. So these mufflers, the muffler was the restrictor, so I believe that's why they become less popular as the engine and cams and headwork evolved. To get that flow out of there. Yeah, so I think I'm getting a little off subject here, but yeah, they were a Jeep muffler that was adapted to the the quiet pack, a set of 48 Webers with a quiet pack. When you get on it, it's a sound that
sounds like a monster coming your way.
Yeah, and it's not around anymore because the big high flow mufflers just emit all kinds of decibels and noise. That when you hear when you hear this thing get on it, it snaps some heads on some of the older guys because they haven't heard that note in a while.
Yeah, and you said Tiger made the dual quiet pack setup.
Yeah, Tiger has a 67 Bug there that is all stock and proper and square, and has a little 1600 and uses as a mock-up. Well, Gary had brought a box of mufflers and pipes and things, and they had a couple of old, whether it would be Fortuned or Thunderbird or Phoenix mufflers, because Gene didn't make his own quiet packs. He had the other guys build them for him. There was a guy's name, I forget his name, and you had SNS. So they took a couple of those and made kind of a pattern, a fixture, if you will.
Yeah. And
then these were welded up together, for Gary's car. He had a couple of them made. And you'd have to ask him the full story. And then this was the last set that he had that were complete. They weren't run, and I was lucky enough to acquire them because they're kind of kind of hard to find because
Yeah.
it's like a tire. It's a wear item. You know, it's not like a shifter or a steering wheel where it can last 60 years. You know, mufflers, they blow out. The packing blows out. They rust out. So yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, so I mean, I'm stoked for you. You got your car finally done. I mean, it's definitely deserving of the cover of Hot VW's magazine, and definitely deserving the awards. And so, you know, congratulations on getting that thing finished. And then, you have any other projects coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a few. You know, I got my black 67. I need to do some service work on that and clean that up a little bit, get a headliner in it. Don't want to overbuild that. I got a little 65 stock sunroof that we got here at the shop. We're bringing it up, making a nice driver. I have a 62 rag top that I was going to do a survivor with, but I found some original 2-piece 5-spokes, and I got a Dino shifter, and I have a lot of period correct parts. So I want to make another, you know, not a, I won't be doing anything to this level of the 61.
Yeah, I think once you do one, you're kind of over it. It's one of those things where it's a long, slow beating, and then you're just like, I've got it done. Because I did that when I did my Gia. It was like, after my Gia was done, I was like, I don't want to do another car like this again, because it wears on you a little bit. You know, it just takes so long, and then it's so nice when you're done. Honestly, part of my problem was it was so nice when it was done. I was just a wreck driving it everywhere because, you know, I was worried about everybody else, you know.
Yeah, because I've proven over the years you can still have just as much fun, if not a lot more fun, with a car you don't have to have the nicest thing. You just want a fun, fast, hot street VW that makes noise and gets you grinning and white knuckling. And so, but I am gonna, you know, the other cars do have Weber motors, and just got to have another 62. Recently got. We were gonna do the black 67 to be a little bit more of a hot street car.
Yeah.
But it's such a nice little simple driver. It's fast, it scares you, but it doesn't need to be all that. And so there's a 62 now that was an ex-race car, de-chromed one-piece window, T-barred thing, and it fits that cow look thing. And it was a race car, so the brakes are dialed in, everything's tight on it. And I got it less engine, and I have of course I have another IDA engine sitting on the furniture cart in the shop. So I'm going to get that one all bolted up and build another hot little fast street car. And it paints all really, really nice. So do a little paint correction touch up and buff it out. And so I'm going to try and have that one done by June also.
Oh, very cool.
Bring that out and let some family members and bring some cars out too. And, I got, like, Dave wants to come down, and he always he uses the 67 as a rental. There's a couple guys from over across in Europe that want to come. So it'd be nice to have a bunch of VWs for visitors to drive, and we can jam around, and and that's just it. The spirit of driving a hot street VW around Orange County, and that's the fun part. Yeah. So
no question.
That's why I'm going to build a few cars for that. So.
No, well, cool, man. Well, I definitely appreciate you making time to come on the podcast, man. Anything, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, are you on Instagram or any of that kind of stuff where people can grab you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I think my handle is Mark Akullian 48. And I do the Star European Super Service Center. It has an Instagram and a Facebook page, but so busy at the shop, I'm not too much onto that. But you can reach out on Facebook and say hi, Messenger, and all that. And
no, totally. I think it's rad, man. I look forward to seeing it again when the summer events kick off. I'll be down there, and I'm sure I'll be down there in Southern California. I'm I'm headed over to the UK at the end of June, but before then, I'll be down. I think the next event might be one of the bug-ins. So we'll see. I may see you there, man. I'll probably bring my chop top out. So.
Oh, nice. Have to come by and hang out. And yeah, it's always good. Always good seeing you out at the events. Even the Octo show, man. It's nice seeing you out there once in a while.
Yeah, well, we drove out there this last Sunday. I drove out there in my double cab. So me and three of our buddies, we all drove from Vegas. So we bombed down there on Friday, went to the Roadster show, and then after that, we looped back over to we went to Octo on Saturday, and then rolled out at about noon and just hightailed it back home. So I left at noon. I made it home by 5:30 and bombing out in the double cab. So the big Type 4 chugging along. But
yeah, reminiscent of the Bull Run days.
That's it, man. Well, I still got the Bull Run bus. She's in the shop getting a full makeover. So that thing, I'm hoping that thing will be done by June. So if that's done by June, I may actually be out in the Bull Run bus. So that'll be definitely something. It'll look the same, but it'll be totally different. So, but no, it's you guys got to make sure, man. You got to get down to my One Crazy Weekend in October 3rd through the 5th, man. Here in Vegas, it is gangbuster great time down here, man. It is nothing but a great time at the Orleans Hotel and Casino for 3 days straight. So. You gotta for sure drag the yellow car down and cruise that thing on Las Vegas Boulevard, man. That's what we do. We do a monster strip cruise and then a poker run where I give away $2,000 in cash. So
nice.
Yeah, for sure.
I do. I want to drive my car out there. I almost took it to Buses by the Bridge if I would have had the time. I really love driving my car, so don't be surprised if I run this thing out there in October on its own power.
Yeah. What kind of mileage you getting on that thing on road trips with the 48s?
I really don't know. I know that I'm burning like a little over half a tank when I do Irwindale.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 80. It's an 80 mile an hour, or 80 mile round trip. So I'll have to, that's good. That's some pre-running I got to do is I'll have to do some fuel mileage check. And, I have been doing a little bit of jetting and a little bit of tuning changes on it to get it to, so that might play a little part in fuel economy, not much, but that's a good question. I'll let you know. I'll let you know how many stops I'm going to need to take.
Yeah, that'd be good. I was grabbing about 18 and a half in the double cab. If I don't have a headwind and we're cruising, we're getting about 18 and a half, and I'm running a 2270 in that thing, but 48 IDAs. And I don't have a 5-speed now. I've got a 4-speed, but at about 77 miles an hour at about 3,000 RPM, about 80 is about 3,100. So it's set to cruise, man. So trust me, I love that vibe, but a bug is way more comfortable to drive on a long road trip. That's for sure than a bus. So, well, cool, man. Yeah. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on, and let's for sure we'll connect at the next meet, and then we'll get this podcast out.
Sounds great.
All right, brother.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it.
You got it. If you enjoyed that podcast, do me the favor and send it out to all your friends that listen to Volkswagen content or don't listen to Volkswagen content and want to get listening to the greatest VW podcast on the market. There's other ones that try, but none have come close. 250 plus episodes gone by, a couple years of podcast listening to get you caught up. But make sure you support Let's Talk Dubs. Go to letstalkdubs.com, pick up some merch. Don't forget, while you're there, register for 2024's One Crazy Weekend. It's going to be the best event of the year. I guarantee it. So bring your car down, get a chance to win your share of over $3,000 in cash money that we're going to be giving out. And don't forget, guys, share the podcast and leave a 5-star review. If you leave a 5-star review, you get a shout out. Don't forget to leave your name in the review so you get to hear your name too. Also, if you pick up some merch, you get a shout out on the podcast. So until next week, guys, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen.